Run your day with Runday.ai.
Happy Friday. Happy 4th of July Eve. We are celebrating the 250th anniversary. That's a quarter of a millennia. Tomorrow, I am here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I'm here actually at the Grey Team office, not in a normal podcast studio, which I've just gotten a tour of. I have experienced some incredible insights into new healing modalities, things I was vaguely aware from different articles, but to see the machinery in place, in motion, and a community here that's coming along for healing. A lot of times we think of healing and, I'm also a yoga instructor. I've certified in Ayurveda, so I've been in this world, but the level at which they've really introduced energy medicine, the integration of mind and body in relation to trauma especially, has been really surprising to me. Tell me more about the origin story of this place. How did this all come to be?
So it's a great question. This was started kind of just as a proof of concept initially. We get out of the military when our bodies and our minds are really just not capable of keeping up with the amount of physical and mental stress that's taking place. Our cortisol levels are spiked. We're very, very good in the United States of America at taking high schoolers and turning them into warriors, but we really don't have a program afterwards to take that warrior and turn him back into a civilian. There really isn't anything in place, and the suicide rate is epidemic right now. There was a study done about 1.5 years ago, and they listed the amount of service members who commit suicide every day.
Was there a time when that rate was significantly lower?
It's kind of a moving target because nobody really tracked it properly. When you come back from deployment or when you come back from military service, you have issues. You have mental pain, physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. And a lot of times, rather than the typical pharmaceutical fix, which is basically just numb yourself down until you don't feel anything. You don't feel any joy, any passion, any pleasure. So that's kind of always been the norm in the past. And unfortunately, when you build up a tolerance to these drugs, the antipsychotics, antidepressants, anti-anxiety pills, sleeping pills, when you build up a tolerance, then they stop working. And so unfortunately, people go out and they begin buying these drugs on the street.
And these are challenges for our society at large. I mean, the suicide rate for men in general has been skyrocketing. And the way we're drugging our children, our teenagers, infants. I mean, there's 250,000 infants in the country that are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication because they're babies.
It's
this pill for every ill thing has gone, really haywire.
100%. And so I think, in our case, in the warrior caste, when these drugs stop working, when we're forced to go out and buy them black market, they tend to not be as pure. They're not regulated, obviously. And you end up with a lot of drug overdoses. It's a very slow death. And it typically in the past has not been counted as a suicide, because it's a slower, it's just a drug overdose. Well, it's a drug overdose because that individual has been taking huge amounts of drugs to try to counteract the night terrors and all the other things that came from their military service. So Duke University and the DoD actually put those numbers into perspective and said, well, these are also suicides. They weren't done with a gun, but these people were killing themselves slowly, willingly. And so that's why the number is so staggering today. And I don't know that it wasn't that big 15, 20 years.
So we kind of don't know that there's been more, deaths from fentanyl alone than all modern wars combined.
Correct.
And so there's a greater problem in our civilization that we're prescribing these drugs in unhealthy ways or using them beyond, ways that have been safely measured. And it's creating, just massive epidemics, and hopefully it's getting a little bit better right now. But it's been just tragic for our country. I have a lot of friends whose friends, fathers, in military and civilian have lost their lives to just the drug industry.
Yeah, and the drug industry, they're even allowed to advertise on television for things that it's really unfortunate, because we just get this amount of information that we don't need, and suddenly we're taking things that from that nobody even knew existed 2 years ago, and they just keep coming up with newer and more powerful drugs, and I think you're absolutely right. It's an epidemic in the the billions and billions of dollars that are being directed towards that. It's craziness. I think that one of the problems that we deal with in the military wellness system is that they separate the mind and the body right away for treatment. And if you're injured on the battlefield or in training, you're going to have a different doctor than you would if you have traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress. Now the issue is, of course, brain inflammation, and that brain inflammation is going to affect the health of the entire body. So breaking it up, even on the civilian side, into all these little specialists, and none of them actually communicate with each other. And so you can't fix one part without thinking about the other part, about what caused that symptom. So for our special forces, special operations, we have a super high cortisol level because we're constantly in fight or flight, and we become addicted to that high cortisol, that adrenaline rush. And we recreate that in our mind over and over and over. And as a result, our testosterone levels drop, our cortisol is constantly spiked, our vagal nerve system, everything is out of whack. And you're not.
So you would call it like a chaos addiction?
Absolutely.
That's sometimes they refer to us entrepreneurs that way. So we have a chaos addiction. We have the ability to kind of retire, take a vacation, but we never do.
Yeah, I think there is an addiction. There's no question. And I think that, in order to treat that, we have to look at the body as a whole. I mean, one of the main things we do here at Grey Team is a holistic approach. We can't fix you mentally if physically, you're sitting in a chair for 12 hours a day. That's just not going to work. So we have to get you moving. We have to get blood flow. If your body has put on, 50, 100 pounds of excess body fat since you left the military, that big amount of adipose tissue is going to produce super high levels of estrogen. And as a result, your testosterone is going to drop.
Oh, is that right?
So now, you're anxious, you're depressed, and it's because you have all this weight around your middle section. It's an estrogen factory. So, we can give you drugs, antidepressants and things, but if we just get that body fat down to a viable percentage, all that's going to clear up by itself, and you don't need to take those drugs. And that's kind of how we treat all of our service members here, is as a whole. We're not going to treat the symptom because that's not the root cause.
That may be one of the most relevant things to most of our audience, myself included. Just I find when I travel, for some reason I can eat, kind of pretty freely, and I maintain my weight or even lose it. Trips to Montreal, Europe, India, places like that where the food quality is a bit different. It's hard here in America if you're not super careful. But, I've explored things like intermittent fasting, looking at the glycemic index for food, like, insulin management. What are some of the, some of the secrets or some of the things you can teach the audience about, kind of getting that, that gut away, like many of us are trying to do?
Well, it all starts with movement.
So when you say movement, is it like high intensity interval training? Is it just kind of walking? Is it what level of intensity and what duration are you feeling is ideal for people?
That's a great question. When I say movement, I mean pretty much any movement. If you think about us as, back before there was recorded history, people lived in caves, right? And they traveled with the seasons to follow the game and to follow, the plant life and so on.
And that's kind of one of our evolutionary advantages.
And unfortunately, in our modern society, we're not using that, and our bodies have not evolved. I mean, let's face it, in a first world country like the United States of America, okay, there is no real shortage of food. I mean, we can literally lay on our couch, watch streaming TV.
Somehow you pay extra to get fewer calories. It's kind of
Exactly.
like what's going on here?
And you can order Uber Eats or anything like 24 hours a day. So there's a constant stream of food. And we feel like, we have to partake in that. And I don't think people understand, and especially not the majority of the audience, that our bodies are designed to actually be able to think clearer, hear better, see faster. All of our movements are designed to do that on an empty stomach.
When we're not eating, we're in the fasting state because we haven't hunted or found something yet. And that could be days.
100%. And you're, if you're talking about this prehistory elevation level where people might be walking for days, you wake up in the morning, there's no Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks, you haven't eaten since yesterday or maybe 3 or 4 days, and you still have to have the energy to be able to successfully hunt or the species dies. So our bodies are designed to store any excess calories as body fat just in case there's a famine. And of course, we live in a first world country where there is no famine. There is no, need to store that excess body fat, but we will maybe evolve to this in a few 100,000 years. But in the meantime, we're all fighting against that evolutionary trait of if you take in excess calories, it gets stored. That energy gets stored just in case there's a famine sometime. So we actually tell our military people, when we're in the military, the first thing we do is we exercise first thing in the morning before we ever eat anything. Okay. And so what are you doing when you do that? You're burning pure body fat. Okay. You're burning the glycogen storage within your muscles. And then when that runs out, you're burning body fat. You're in ketosis.
And they also won a Nobel Prize, about 9 years ago on autophagy. And so not only you're burning those things, but if you have cells that are cancerous, they have microplastics in them, you're also burning because your body has this amazing mechanism of identifying the worst cells and consuming those first.
Absolutely. So it's nothing but a plus, plus, plus. Now, of course, you're always going to have the exceptions of people who are hypoglycemic and, they start to shake or get headaches and so on, and their bodies really can't handle fasting. But for everyone else, it's a fantastic health boost, and it can be done, with fast mimicking diets. Or
I'm a big fan of those. I just call it insulin fasting. I meant to ask this earlier. How did you go down on this path? So from what the VA or, the military does from a medical perspective to go from that to what the amazing innovative things I've seen here at this facility. What were the first steps in that direction? Was it more a personal journey or with your patients?
For me, it was personal. It was trying to figure out how to become a civilian after serving. And one of the things I learned is that you never become a civilian. I joined the Army after high school, and, you're a naive young kid. And once you've seen and done the things that.
So right after high school, no jobs in between, no gap year.
Not really. I mean, I think I worked at a gas station for a few weeks in between there, but all of my growing up, becoming a man was done underneath the guise of the United States military. So it's kind of
In some countries, that's required. Should we require that?
In my opinion, I think we
here?
should. In my opinion, I think we should. And I don't think it should be a draft to go to war. I think it should just be that you appreciate the freedoms that we have in this country, and they're worth fighting for. And I think you don't take them for granted. You're not entitled to live in a completely safe world. And if you take a look at the animal kingdom, if you watch any of the shows on Discovery Channel or anywhere else, there's no animal on this planet that is given food every day and is completely safe from predators, except the ones in a zoo that are in a cage, and we don't want to think of ourselves as being locked up, in prison, but that's the truth. You're not entitled to be 100% safe. You're not entitled to constant supply of food or medical care. All that has to be earned, and somebody's paying for it. 24 hours a day, we have military service members out protecting the freedoms that we have. And we don't even think about the guys who are all over the planet right now in nuclear submarines, for instance. They don't see the light of day for months at a time. They don't have any circadian rhythm to speak of. Their body and their mind are so messed up by no sunlight, no looking out at the sky or anything like that. I mean, their timetables are just run by alarm bells and things like that. And they're sacrificing right now. But the truth is, like, when they finish their jobs in the military and they come home after 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, they're going to pay for that service for the rest of their lives, because you don't just bounce back from that. You've actually trained your body. So to answer your question, I think for me, because I made that sacrifice and so many of my friends did, and we came back, we couldn't just become civilians. We didn't know how. There was no pathway laid, and so many succumb to, it's easier just to die than it is to try and understand how the world works, how people can leave at 5 o'clock when the job isn't finished, because we don't do that in the military. We don't go by 9 to 5. We're not clerks. So, and we never paid rent. We didn't, we lived in almost an institution. And I think it's a great thing to be in that warrior caste, to be called for that. But there needs to be a deceleration program in place. And that's kind of what we created at Grey Team, was this ability to decelerate, to drop the cortisol levels, to find new technologies.
More about some of those steps in between, or some of those early steps. You went from, okay, now you're a civilian again, to you have hyperbolic chambers. So there must have been an evolution there. What was the beginning of the journey like?
The beginning of the journey was, I had a friend who got out of the Marine Corps. He did 2 combat tours to Afghanistan, and he was his squad's machine gunner. And unfortunately, one of the things that they don't tell you when you join the Marines is, yes, you're going to get the fancy uniform that everyone loves to see and the white gloves. But when you're holding a heavy weapon up against your head, like a machine gun, and you're firing thousands and thousands of rounds a day, each one of those rounds is an explosion, and it creates a cumulative traumatic brain injury that obviously a recruiter is.
Is this something they've just discovered, or have they known this for a while?
They've known. Yeah, well, it's not highly publicized, again, because you're not going to, what's publicized is you see the guys marching on TV with swords and they look amazing. And
that makes a good recruitment.
Yeah, exactly. And we need those people. We need those recruiting videos. We need people out there. So I don't fault that, but what I did fault was, now this friend comes back and his wife leaves him. He doesn't have any life skills. He can't hold a job. He has the GI Bill to go to school, but you have to maintain a GPA. And if you can't focus because you're losing brain cells because you have inflammation of the brain from post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, and that's kind of an insidious thing because it's a very slow decline. Your neurocognitive skill sets slowly drop each week afterwards. And there's no defining point. It's just slowly. It happens so slowly. You don't notice it. You just know you can't concentrate anymore. You have no vocabulary, words that you used to be able to pull at a moment's notice out of space where you're speaking your mind. All of a sudden your vocabulary is back to like an 8 or 9-year-old. And it's very frustrating. And he was completely unable to keep his GPA above like a D average. And the government says, well, you obviously don't want to go to school. Far be it to examine the fact that you're not going to school because you can't function yet. You need to be healed. So he became, suicidal and came down to actually sleep on my couch. And together we kind of went on a journey. And this was back in 2014 to try to figure out, what are we dealing with? Because we both were given drugs getting out of the military, but they didn't fix anything. So what happened? So we did everything you can think of. We did flotation tank therapy, transcendental meditation, trauma conscious yoga, and then slowly we started getting into technologies, the vibroacoustic deceleration of the central nervous system. When you're a warrior, you're pretty much fearless. So when it comes to getting fixed, if somebody says this works, you're going to try it. You're not going to hesitate. And so we went in every direction, and slowly we learned certain things work and certain things don't. And it grew into what it is now. Grey Team is literally, as you just experienced, it's probably the largest collection of, I want to say, biohacking tools to fix and heal the human body in a wellness aspect. It's probably the biggest collection under
Yeah, when I
roof.
drove here today, I was not expecting the level of technological advancement. I was expecting more like, almost like when you look at physical therapy and it's just some rubber bands and light weights. So, when I saw this equipment, I was astonished at the things you've discovered and collected here.
Yeah, it's actually grown bigger than I would have ever imagined. We have more equipment being donated than we have room for. And so now we have to actually move into another facility at some point that has more space. And every time we're on the news, we actually attract more and more people from all over the country, military service members. In fact, I have a video that I can show you of where an individual was actually in a hospital environment and saw Grey Team after a suicide attempt. Can you throw that up real quick for me, please?
I ended up in the psych ward in 2011 and I hung myself. If you're a fucking vet, you need to come here. My name is William. I'm retired United States Army, 26 years. I'm a former Green Beret for most of my career. I retired out of Fort Bragg in 2010. My first deployment in Afghanistan was in 2002, and it was the wild, wild west. It was crazy. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I was part of a team of people, and 4 children were killed, and I haven't been able to get that out of my head. Even now, the images, it's horrific, and it ruined my life. It ruined my marriage. It ruined my relationship with my children. I've lived in my RV since 2000 and pick up and move, and nobody knows where I'm at. And that's been my life. Even now, I ended up in the psych ward in 2011 and I hung myself. And if the people working there wouldn't have come by, I wouldn't be here right now. They revived me, and here I am. So I've lived on that precipice of wanting to fucking end it ever since that day. So when I seen the Grey Team on Fox News about 7 months ago, I'm like, well, this is for me. So I filled out the application, was accepted for the program, came down here at the beginning of June, and it's been monumental. It's been an amazing experience. It's reset the hope. Most importantly, I've lost weight. I've gotten back into shape and just a sense of better well-being about myself. For a guy like me, that was huge. You know, it was legitimate help. It really was. And it just drove me back into a sense of well-being. I felt like I was a part of a team. This place changed that for me. So if you're a fucking vet, you need to come here. I don't care what state you live in. You know, these guys are going to take care of you. Okay. So I thank them for that. Now I'll leave here in a better headspace. Another tool in my rucksack, hope, which I must have thrown out years ago because I didn't have it. And I have these guys to thank for that. I do. I love. Thank you.
What, for members of the audience that do qualify that are veterans, what should they do? How do they get in touch?
Excellent
Part
question.
of this.
Yes. So there is no cost whatsoever for anyone who has served our country or is currently serving. They would just need to apply for services. They do that online at our website, which is on the screen right now, www.greyteam.org. And right there, they can fill out. They're just going to ask a few questions, some medical history, and they need to upload their military documents. And we will get to them and do an interview process. So we would encourage anyone. You don't have to be in crisis. You don't have to be. We would much rather you come here before you start going down that spiral, because we can fix it, and it's a free. You earned this by serving our nation, and we feel like as a community, this is the least we can do.
And for those of the audience that want to contribute, either donate equipment or funding, part of the fundraiser, what are some options for them?
Another great question. So also on greyteam.org, they can donate there. We support this. We do not receive any federal funding whatsoever. So we support this truly just by corporate and private generosity. So we do accept, donations online. We also have quite a few events and galas that come up, and we do show all those on social media. We have 2 big events at Mar-a-Lago every year. We have a huge gala in Boca Raton, Florida, and we're always doing smaller events in various places. And we would encourage anyone who is curious or wanting to donate equipment, technology, time, treasure, what have you, to reach out to us, because it's more appreciated than you can imagine.
All right, final 2 questions. 1, where and when are the events, and what's exciting about it? I guess that's 3 questions, but it's part of 1.
Okay.
Talk more about that.
So the next event coming up is going to be in October, on October 10th, where we are taking over a super high-end private racetrack where you'll be able to drive race cars at 150, 160 miles an hour, or be driven around by an F1 professional driver. And then we have the America First Gala, which will take place at Mar-a-Lago on December 3rd, which is a black tie event. And there are tickets available for both of those events. And then we have a huge fashion show also at Mar-a-Lago on February 11th, which is fantastic. We combine the military with high fashion and professional models, and the veterans get to walk the runway escorting beautiful women. So that's always a treat for us. And then our signature gala, which is called They Are Not Bulletproof, that's going to take place in, date for that is March 6th of 2027. And that is probably one of the most fun events that anyone could ever go to, because we get to do things that other galas would only dream about. We get to fly in by helicopter and rappel down and parachute in and do all kinds of craziness on film and in person. So it's an extremely entertaining event.
Well, would love to join some of those events. They sound fun. And then final single question is, where does the name Grey Team come from?
That's always the $1 million question. It's actually a 2-part answer. In 2002, the Pentagon was trying to figure out that the global war on terror had only been going on a little over a year. And we were trying to figure out where post-traumatic stress came from and how to deal with it. So they took a think tank, put it together with a bunch of neurosurgeons and PhDs who studied neurology, and they put them in a room together. And because they dealt with the gray matter, they nicknamed them the Grey Team. And their job was to figure out what post-traumatic stress was and how to alleviate it. And in typical government fashion, they really didn't accomplish a whole lot and eventually disbanded the entire project, I think about 1.5 years, 2 years later. And so we kind of liked that connotation. And then in the military itself, we have echelons of warriors. Everybody's heard of, SEAL Team 6 now because they've been Hollywood stars, but there are certain people in the military who you will never see their faces. They're silent warriors. Their pictures are always grayed out. They're just a blur. They receive their awards in private. You never hear anything about them and the heroic deeds they do. And so we really liked that connotation of warriors who don't complain, who are carrying extreme burdens, and yet they continue to persevere. And so we kind of put those two together and we came up with the Grey Team.
That's quite an answer. Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor getting to know you, and thank you for hosting me.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming.
Stay ahead of the curve, hit that bell for notifications, and join us next time.